So I'm adding my back inside liner. I don't know if you noticed in the previous video, but I had forgotten to put some of my beads, so I had to undo, go back and add the beads back in. It happens sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to add my back liner the same way. I'm out hole 8 in my previous row, so I'm going in hole 8. Out hole 7. In 6. Out 5. There are no beads in this row. In 4. Out 3. In 2. And out 1. Okay. Now, my pages are attached. I want to go back and tie those loose ends up. And the way I do that is I'm going to go work my way from row 10 to row 1. I'm going to go from my row 10, hole 1, I'm going to go inside row 9, hole 1. And those are going to be tied together. I'm going to go outside hole 2 in my row 9. Oops, I made a mistake here. My thread got caught up. Okay, so it's in row 9, hole 1, out hole 2. And then I go in row 7, hole 2. Oops. It might work better if I have the right page open here. Then I go out hole 1 in my row 7 still. Then I go in hole 1 on page 6, on row 6 that is. out hole 2. Oops. I just pulled my thread right out of the needle here. Okay. So I'm out hole 2 on row 7. I go in row 2 on row 6. It's hard with these flaps. They get in the way. Out hole 1 in row 6. In hole 1 in row 5. Out hole 2 in row 5. Want that snug. And I go in hole 2 on row 4. It's easier if you leave your flaps open. On row 4. Out row 2. In hole 1 on row 3. Out hole 2. In hole 2 on row 2. Out hole 1. In row 2. And finally in hole 1 in row 1. So the left part of my pages are attached. Now what I can do is go through and pull on some of these threads that are a bit looser. If there's too much slack in there. Just pull up there. But you do want a little bit of room for expansion for photos, and basically it's the tapes here that are going to hold the whole album pretty steady. So what I'm going to do is, because I need some more thread, I'm going to take this opportunity to tie a knot here before I work the other end of my album. in the next video, we'll do the same thing on this side to hold these pages together. And then the binding will be done. So I added some more thread. I'm going to tie it to my last piece, my last tail of thread here. Okay. These pieces won't be visible anyways because they're going to be inside the liner. Okay, so now I work my way down to hole number 7. I'm on the inside front liner. So now I'm going to work holes 7 and 8, working my way down the album towards the back. So I'm back at the front of the album. I'm going to flip this around. So now I'm going from row 1, hole 7, to hole 7 in row 2. And I start off with a wonderful knot. Like I said, this is not my favorite part of the album. Hole 7 of row 2, I go out hole 8, in hole 8 on row 3, out hole 7, in hole 7 in row 4, out hole 8 of row 4, in hole 8 of row 5, out hole 7, in hole 7, out row 8, sorry, out hole 8, in hole 8 in my next row, out hole 7, in hole 7 in the next row, out hole 8, in hole 8 in row 9, out hole 7, in hole 7, the last row, row 10, and out hole 8 on row 10. I hope this is in frame. Whoops, I put this in the wrong hole. Let me just fix this here. I put it back in my hole 8 of row 9. Actually goes in hole 8 of row 10. There. So it finishes off. It's out hole 8 of my last row. Okay, what I'm going to do is to secure the last page, I'm going to go in row 8, in hole 8 of row 9, and I'm going to tie it on the inside. So inside hole 8 in row 9, like that. And now I'm just going to tie a knot here. To secure it. You don't want to pull too hard, but you want it snug enough. There we go. And your album is bound. this is what it looks like. Now, what I can do is tie a little piece of ribbon, a little piece of tape on my ribbon to hold it in place for now on the back part. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. This is just so it doesn't move around too much. Okay, now we're going to adhere our pages. Because there are no pockets on the liners, on the inside liners where your covers will attach, I can actually put a piece of tape along this edge to seal it off. So I'm going to do that. And now I can remove my tape backing to form the pages. And I lift this up and close. Make sure it's straight. There we go. The inside liner is done. I may as well do the back right now too. Same thing, there's no pocket for the inside liners. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a piece of tape along the edge. And I fold in two, and there we are. Okay. Now I'm going to form the pockets in the pages. The same way, I'm just going to remove my tape. And I just fold it down straight. And there's page one. And then this one. I leave this open. That forms the pocket where my tag will stick out. And go ahead and do that for all of your pages. And then we'll be working on the covers. And we'll be assembling to the covers to the album. Now I'm going to start working on my covers. The way the album is constructed is there's the front cover that's attached to the liner page, like that. And the back, the book will sit on the back of the cover. And there's a spine on the right, and then there's a little flap that wraps up over the cover, and this is where I have my two eyelets, and I wrap a ribbon through to close the album. So we're going to go ahead and assemble the back cover. There isn't anything to do to the front cover right now because we're just going to be wrapping this cover, but I need to assemble these pieces together first. And what I do is I use a piece of plastic, and I put that behind the spine and the other cover pieces. And that way, when the album opens and closes, it's not just the paper that's covering the album that's taking all of the stress. This plastic here really reinforces it, and that's what's going to make your album cover more durable, because it's going to be taking the stress when you're opening and closing the album. So we're going to go ahead and start by creating our cover. Now, one thing I mentioned is the back and the front covers are a little bit wider, because when I put my album on my covers, when I glue it down, it's going to be flush with the left side of the cover, but I want a little bit of the right to stick out, because I have my side tags that go in and they're going to be sticking out a bit, so I don't want the spine to interfere with the tags on the right. So what I do is I've put the names on my pieces so I don't get mixed up with the front cover and the spine. So I'm going to start by taping my spine down to my piece of plastic. So I put tape around the edges. Still have some thread left over from stitching. And then I put strips of tape across the length, the height of the spine. Remove the backing. Now I want to stick this onto my sheet of plastic, centered horizontally, and actually I'll do it this way, and the top and the bottom should just meet the edges of the top and bottom of the piece of plastic. There we go. Now I'm going to use my bone folder just to make sure this tape is well adhered. Okay, now in order for my spine and the front to be able to fold over like that, I don't want to stick it right next to my cover, because it's not going to fold very well. I want to leave about 1/8 of an inch like that, which is the width of your spine, so that there's room for it to move when you close the album. Now, I can just leave 1/8 of an inch, but also my tape is about 1/8 of an inch, so a little trick is I'm just going to lay down a piece of tape here, and that's about the distance from which I will put my pieces. Those of you who bought my first tutorial for the 8x8 album, the covers, it's the same procedure for preparing the spine and wrapping them, except the 8x8 doesn't have that extra front piece. And there's no spine on the right, it's on the left. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to add tape to the rest of my piece of plastic, and then I'm going to glue my covers on. So this is going to go right next to my first piece of tape. You don't have to put that first piece of tape down. You can just go ahead and stick the second piece about 1/8 of an inch from the spine. once you start making these albums, they're easier the second time around. I've made quite a few different patterns, well, different models with the same tutorial, the same pattern. The first one, the one that's in your written tutorial, was done with the primrose stack. And then I did one with the steampunk Botanica that didn't have the waterfall on the front, but this one will have the waterfall on the front, just like the one in your tutorial. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that when I attach my cover it's going to be straight and not off to the side, because then obviously it's not going to close very well. So I'm going to start by just removing the piece of tape that's 1/8 of an inch from my spine, and I'm going to attach the cover rather than removing all of the tape, because if it's not on properly it's a lot easier to just remove it from one piece. Okay, so this is going to go well. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of my tape. I want to take this opportunity to say, hi Lorraine, you know who you are. I hope you enjoy making this album. Send me pics. Your first album was absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so now I'm going to add my little front flap that's going to close over like that. So again, I want it 1/8 of an inch away from my spine piece. So I'm going to remove the piece of tape that's 1/8 of an inch away from the spine, and I'm going to attach this. Make sure it's straight, yeah. Okay, use the bone folder. There. So our pieces are ready to cover. I've got my pieces cut and ready to wrap my covers. My outside pieces, and these are the pieces that are going to be on the inside of my cover in the album. So I'm going to start with the outside pieces. What I'm using is cardstock for the inside, and I'm using just my scrapbook paper for the outside. So let's start with the front cover. I'm going to put tape along the edges and inside the cover, and that's going to prevent my paper from bubbling up in the center when it's attached. take my piece of paper and I'm going to lay my cover on top so that it's centered left to right, top to bottom. That way I get about an inch of paper all around so that I can wrap it around the edges of my album. Press this down to adhere. Now I put tape on the edges of my cover and on the edges of my paper. Now to get a nice crisp corner, each corner about 1/8 of an inch away from the corner of the cover, I'm going to draw a line, diagonal line on each one. One-eighth of an inch away from each corner. Now I cut these corners off, making sure I don't go any closer to my corner than my line. Starting at the narrow end of the album, I'm just going to fold this into here, like that, to get the fold started. I remove the tape from the paper and from my cardboard, and I fold the edge up to the inside, make sure it's nice and tight. Now I'm going to start working on my longer edge, and what I do to get this nice and square, use your fingernail and press in at the corner on the paper. I don't know if you can see that. Just press in here so that the paper is tucked in slightly like that. You're going to do that at each corner before you wrap the album. And then I fold it over to get that crease going. Remove the tape. And fold up. There, you see, you get a nice sharp corner when you do that. So I move around to the other side and I do the same thing. See, I just fold the paper in a bit. Remove the tape. That one's done. And then for the last side, I do that to both ends. Fold the corners in. That's going to be covered with my inside cover. There. So now your front cover is done on the outside. So what I'm going to do I'm going to do basically the same thing with my back cover. So with the plastic side up, I'm going to add my tape to hold my paper in place, and then I'm going to wrap my edges in. There's my tape. Here it is. Now I want to add this tape also around the edges of my individual pieces here. That way my paper won't move around. There's going to be a lot of action going on these sides here, so you don't want your paper to move around. Now, I'm going to put some down here. And last but not least, I'm going to add some tape in the gap, in that 1/8 inch gap in between my pieces. So now I'm going to attach my back cover to my paper. part involves a lot of tape, but you don't want to skimp on tape at this point because this is what's going to make your album covers nice and solid. Now make sure if you're using a pattern paper that has a design on it that you're putting it on the right side. Your two narrow pieces go on the right. And you place it so that it's centered and there's about 1 inch on each side. Then again, I'm going to trim my corners about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to mark those first. If your cardstock is really thick, you might want to do it at about 1/4 inch away. I do this back cover the same as the front cover for wrapping it up, so I'm going to trim my corners. Making sure I don't cut too close to my corner. And I add tape on all of my outside edges. I'm also going to want my paper to stick in the gap when I fold it over. So I would put a piece of tape in the gap here and in the gap there. Now I already put that piece of tape in earlier when I was measuring my 1/8 of an inch when I was assembling my 3 covers to my piece of plastic. So I'm just going to lift the corners up so that when I do fold my paper, I can tuck it inside there. And it's going to stick. But if you didn't put that 1/8 inch piece of tape earlier, then you can just go ahead and add it now. Now I also add tape around my paper. This time I did it after I trimmed the corners. You can do it before or after. Actually, if you do it after, it's a bit better because you're going to save on tape. You won't be cutting it off. Now I'm going to start wrapping the same way I did the front cover. Start with the narrow edge, fold the paper down to get it started, remove the tape, and fold up. I'm going to do the same thing with my corner. press in here, get a nice square corner, remove my tape, make sure this piece of tape is lifted up, the tape backing. There we go. Now when I fold my paper in later, it's going to stick. It's going to stick in the gaps there. I forgot to remove my tape backing from here. There. Fold in the corners. Working with small covers like this, it's easy to just fold them down to get them taped on straight. Did I forget to? Yes, I forgot to remove my tape from this side. There. So now what I do is I fold up my cover and I just press the edges of the paper in like this and just run your hand along the outside, get a good feel. Yeah. So the outside of my cover is done. I'm going to do the inside, and I use this yellow cardstock. I cut it to size. I'm going to add tape around my edges and on the inside, and I'm going to adhere it. I need some new tape. It's almost done. I apply tape across. And I'm going to center this horizontally, vertically. There's just going to be a small piece of the cover showing through. Now, to make sure I get this on straight, what I do is I just remove one piece of tape on my left edge. That way I can line it up and make sure it's straight, and then once it's held in place, I go ahead and remove the rest of my tape. I mean the tape backing, not the tape. It makes it easier when you're trying to position something on. You don't want to put it on crooked. Once you've got all your tape stuck, it's really hard to get these apart. There. So there's my tuck cover, which will go like so on my album. And we'll do the inside of the back cover. Got tape backing all over the place. So I do the same here. I put tape all around the edges. And across. Now, also here, I'm going to want to apply two-sided tape on either side of the narrow gaps on each side of the spine, and that's so that this paper will really stick well here where it's going to have all of the movement. And also, I'm going to remove the tape backing from the piece that's in the gaps. Now, I'm not going to put my tape all the way up to the top because I don't want it to show through, because my cardstock is going to leave a narrow edge. So I don't want my tape going up to there, so I want to put it a bit lower. I'll even put an extra 2 pieces along the spine, since there's going to be so much movement there. It's not necessary, but okay. So again, I'm going to position my cardstock on the inside of my cover. I'm going to remove one strip of tape. And once I know it's straight, I can adhere it. And then I can remove the rest of the tape. here. Glue it down. Now, I'm going to fold my cover in a closed position, and I'm going to press down in the gaps. That way the cardstock will really stick in there and it's not going to bubble up. And the same thing there. Okay, it's time to move on to the next video, and we'll be attaching the album to the covers.